Hey, for today's programming tool, we're going to talk about IDEs, code editors, and text editors, with a focus on IDEs, and exactly with a focus on the PyCharm IDE. So first of all, I want to explain you the difference between IDEs, code editors, and text editors. What you're looking at is a text editor program. This is Notepad on Windows. The sole purpose of this program is to allow you to view and edit text files. And by text files, we also mean like .py files, because these are also text files, but with a .py extension. So it is possible to program in a text editor. The problem is that you don't have syntax highlighting in a text editor. So as you can see, compared to PyCharm, we don't see different colors for different code elements. So in PyCharm, for example, we have the same color for variables, and then we have another color for functions, and so on. That is not the case when you're using a text editor. So if you want to make your life harder, then feel free to use a text editor. Otherwise, the next in line is code editors. Code editors are things like Visual Studio Code, which I'll demonstrate you here. So this is Visual Studio Code. This is called a code editor. I'll explain you now the difference between a text editor and a code editor, and the difference between a code editor and an IDE. So as you can see, the code is highlighted here. So Visual Studio Code, which is the code editor program here, is able to recognize Python code, and it knows that it needs to use a particular color for functions such as input and print and so on, and another color for variables, so that it makes it visibly easier for the programmer to read the code. Another example of a code editor is Atom. So you don't need to install these programs, I'm just mentioning them here so that you know the difference between these tools and PyCharm. So this is Atom. It's another code editor similar to Visual Studio Code. It also gives you syntax highlighting. And then we have IDEs, such as PyCharm. So an IDE has all the features that text editors have and all the features that code editors have, plus they have some tools which makes programming easier. And these tools are particularly used when you get more advanced, a more advanced programmer, and you really have the need to use these tools. For example, PyCharm has a debugger, which we will cover later. You'll know how to use the debugger. It makes it easier to fix bugs, to find and fix bugs in your programs, so to find problems. And you also have code completion in PyCharm. So when you're writing code, for example, list.pycharm will suggest you what methods you can use with list. So that is something that text editors don't have. Code editors can also have one or another from these features. So for example, Visual Studio Code also has a debugger. So there isn't really a very defined border between an IDE and a code editor, at least nowadays. So in Visual Studio Code, for example, although it is officially known as a code editor, it does have a lot of features that IDEs have. However, my recommendation is to use PyCharm as the IDE, because unlike the other code editors and IDEs, PyCharm is exclusively built for Python. So basically you can refer to other programs as a Swiss knife, which are built for different languages, including Python, and PyCharm is designed for around Python, and it really makes things easier for a programmer. So now I want to focus on explaining you PyCharm. As you can see, PyCharm is constructed of the editor area, which is this area here where we write the code. And then we have the directory tree, which is the place where we see the directories and the files for our project. And then we have the terminal, which can be switched on with this button here, terminal. The terminal can be used to interact with the operating system, so with Windows or Mac, whatever you're using, and you can interact using commands. So you can copy files from one place to another, you can delete files, etc. So that is something we will not cover right now. You rarely need to do those things, but the terminal is just there, an integrated part of the IDE. We also have the Python console in the IDE, which I explained already. So you can use this to interact with Python line by line. And then we have this debugger, which I'll cover later as I explained, and then we have the run button to run the code. So those are the main features of the IDE. To change the settings of your PyCharm, you can go to File and then Settings. On Mac, you can access settings with the shortcut CMD and a comma. On Windows, this is the shortcut. So if you press that, these are all the sections for the settings. So you have settings for the appearance and behavior, key map, editor, etc. Let's look at appearance and behavior, and if you click under appearance, here you can change the font of all the elements but the code itself. So if I change this to, for example, 12, I press enter, and then I press OK here, what we will get is these elements of the program of the IDE will get smaller, but the code stays the same. So if you want to change the font of your code, then you want to go to settings again, and you won't go to appearance, but you want to go to editor. So there you are accessing this editor area here, and you want to go to font, and then here you can change the font of your PyCharm. So if I go to 14 and I press apply, then you'll see that the code here is going to get smaller. So choose whatever you feel comfortable with, but I would suggest not to get lost in a downward spiral with changing settings on your IDE, because I know how it works. You just get distracted and you forget to code. You get distracted with optimizing your IDE. So please try to control that. I'll put this again to 20. And the other thing I want to show you is you can change the theme of your IDE under appearance and behavior, appearance and the theme. You have these four to choose from. So if you want a light theme, you can choose that. Dracula is the default theme. One important setting you might want to look at is the project setting. So project, in my case it is Python projects. That's the name of my project, of my directory, Python projects. In your case it could be different. So if you click that, you'll see this Python interpreter and Python structure, or you can expand it and you'll see the same thing here. So Python interpreter, if you go there, and here now this is the Python interpreter that is executing your code. So when you run that triangle button uses the interpreter which is selected in this setting here to run your code. So in my case, this is Python 3.10. This is what I've installed in this machine. So if you have multiple Python installations, you will see multiple interpreters here listed. So you want to select the one that is probably the latest version. To add another interpreter, you can go to this setting gear icon and go to add. And then you want to go to new environment. So you don't have to do this now, I'm just mentioning it. Maybe you need it later. So new environments, and then you select here the base interpreter, which is again the latest version. So that will select a new interpreter. It will not install Python in your machine. You just select that interpreter to be used for PyCharm. So I'm going to press cancel because I have an interpreter now. Now these are packages which we'll cover later, Python packages. So just leave it as it is now. Then we have some advanced settings in here which I'll not cover now. So it's about the debugger, several settings about that. You have languages and frameworks. This is also a bit advanced, you don't need to change this. Under tools, you also have optional things like space, which is a feature of PyCharm. It gives you collaboration solutions, so I'll not cover that either. So the most important settings to be aware of was appearance and behavior, editor, and project here. Under plugins, you have PyCharm plugins which allow you to make PyCharm more advanced, so you can add basically new features to it. For example, one plugin I would like to suggest to use, you can search for Power, and Power Mode 2 is the plugin I want you to consider installing. So if I install this, press accept, and then I press OK. Wait a while. And to be able to activate the plugin, I want to close PyCharm and open it again. And after I have restarted PyCharm, I can code something and you'll see these sparks. So that could make coding more fun, more interactive perhaps. Some people like it, some people hate it. If it didn't activate for you, try tools and toggle power mode. So try that and try again to code to see those sparks. So again, if you go to file settings, under plugins, in installed now, under installed, you'll see that this Power Mode 2 is installed as a plugin. To change the settings of Power Modes, you can go to Appearance and Behavior and then click on Power Mode 2, and then you can, for example, you can disable the flames and just have the sparks. Again, I would suggest not to get lost with these optimizations, so just allocate a maximum of 5 minutes changing these settings and then go on and start coding again. So you can press OK to apply those changes. Another cool feature of PyCharm I wanted to show you, which is very handy, is if you have two files, for example, another file, let's say this is main1, and you have main and main1, and if main, for example, is a bit different from main1, so you have coded in different files and you have made some changes, you can compare the two files. You can select both of them with shift and then right click and go to compare files, which is at the end here. That should show this window view. So here on the left we have main.py, you can see the file name in here, and here on the right we have main1.py. Highlighted in green is the new line that this file has, so you can easily see the differences between the two. You can scroll up and down to see all the differences. In this case we only have this difference. This line is extra here in this main1.py file. You can close that view by pressing that, and you go back to main.py. And so that was an introduction on the differences between text editors, code editors, and IDEs, and also an introduction to PyCharm. We looked at some settings, so you're now probably more familiar with PyCharm. Thanks a lot for following, and I'll see you later.